anybody in this room who has that great idea but needs the money. In the description of this panel, they wrote that oxygen is really what entrepreneurs need. Now, it's not everything, but that oxygen is incredibly important, because if you have a great idea but don't have great money behind you, you might just flounder. But just because you have money doesn't mean you have a great idea. So the people that we've assembled for this panel, I think, can give us a great amount of insight to what they've done right, what they've done wrong along the way, and it can help people in this room figure out how they can take the correct steps to make their idea, their company, their startup a reality. So let's start bringing them down to the stage.
Please welcome on stage Nina Achajan, partner of Hive in Principal Index Ventures. Followed by James Huang, Chairman of Taiwan External Trade Development Council. Vahi Kuzoyan, the co-founder and CEO of Service Titan. Lily Onova Pakaru, the partner of Kapoor Capital. Tom Trowbridge, the co-founder of Hedera Hashgraph. The girl with the best shoes here, Caroline Wcit, the executive director of UC Berkeley Skydeck. And finally, and with the greatest name, and I will get this wrong, Lucine Yeghiazarian, the Vice President of GoPro. Thank you.
So before we get into this conversation about innovation and capital, James Huang, as he was just introduced, the chairman of Taiwan External Trade Development Council, is going to talk to us about the deeper meaning of money. I've covered a lot of startups in my 10 years at CNN, and a lot of successful entrepreneurs, some of the most powerful CEOs in the world, from Jack Ma to you name it. And the one thing that so many of those people have in common, they always tell me that they were never in pursuit of the money. That is not what motivated them. And so James has a really important message that he can share with us about what you do with that money, what good can come of that money, and how that doesn't just make you a better citizen, but also a better businessman or businesswoman. So James, would you start us off with the keynote speech here?
Well, thank you, Samuel, for your kind introduction. And fellow panelists, friends of Wcit, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And Chairperson Yvonne Chu of Wcit, thank you for being with us this afternoon. I would like to first thank Armenia for hosting this important event, which enable us to meet here in this beautiful city of Yerevan, the capital of Armenia and one of the oldest cities in the world. Thank you, Armenia. And I know our topic today is innovation meets capital, and all our panelists are the top minds in this field. But I would like to begin this section with the question, why are we here? It's an obvious and quite profound question. The answer that immediately comes to my mind is that we are here to discuss ideas about building our digital future. And if all goes well, we can help great ideas affect change. All our efforts, everything we are doing, are directed toward changing the world, making it better through innovation and entrepreneurship. So hopefully our future generations will live better and happier lives. Which is why it's wonderful to see so many young people here today pursuing their dreams and doing what they deeply care about. In the past decade, like a digital tsunami, new technologies have forever changed the global economic landscape and the way we live. Today, everything is connected and constantly learning from each other. To survive and thrive in this digital landscape, every industry has to be a digital industry, and every company, no matter what field they are in, needs to become a tech company. Nowadays, more and more companies are calling themselves software companies and data companies, rather than companies by traditional definition. And this is why WCIT is so important in this digital era. New technologies like artificial intelligence, 5G, big data, blockchain, cloud computing, and quantum computing, they will redefine our future, a future filled with possibilities. And all the while, I think it's important that we make sure that we are using our digital technology as an instrument for good. We need to make sure that the progress we are making is grounded in rules-based systems where privacy, security, and freedom are protected. Then, and only then, can we build sustainable, long-lasting relationships and systems that generate new industries and new channels of commerce that change the world for better. The topic of this session is innovation meets capital. So like meeting your dream date for the first time, I think the meeting part is the most important. After all, if there is no meeting, then there is no business. Also, I think how we meet is important. You always want to meet if you can help it at the right place and at the right time. In that sense, I think WCIT is really a fantastic way to meet. We have some of the world's finest professionals and best minds gathered here. This is truly a great venue for good relationships to develop. At my organization, Tetra, meetings are a big part of what we do every day. We help businesses meet with businesses around the world. We also host trade shows, exports, and all types of industry meetings and events year-round for innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors to meet and discuss opportunities for business. One of the many business shows that we host is called Innovex. It is a platform focused on connecting innovation, entrepreneurship, and capital that we have been holding every year alongside Computex in Taipei since 2016. And Computex, as many of you may know, is the second largest ICT show in the world. And our goal with the show is that no matter what your needs are, whether you are an innovator, entrepreneur, or investor, you can realize your digital vision at Innovex and Computex. This year, 467 startup teams from around the world attended the show, and it became the largest gathering of its kind in Asia. During the show, we also facilitated startup matchmaking sessions for 69 startups and 45 venture capitals and corporates with good results. When it comes to innovation, I think Armenia and Taiwan are very similar. From what I have observed, Armenia and Taiwan may be far apart on the world map, but we have one very important thing in common. We are not big in size, but we are big in mind. For both Armenia and Taiwan, game-changing innovation is what we are good at. For example, innovative minds from Armenia have given the world the MRI machine, which transformed healthcare forever, and the automatic telling machine, which changed the financial sector forever. In Taiwan, innovative companies like TSMC have changed the semiconductor industry forever. And of course, Taiwan is known as the powerhouse of the global ICT industry. In this digital era, we know innovation matters more so now than ever before. But we also know that innovation alone is not enough. We need to connect innovation with entrepreneurship in order to put good ideas into action. And we need to sustain them with good investment. We need to link up different stakeholders so together they can capitalize on ideas and bring them forth from mind to market. Again, that's where Taitra comes in. Whether you are in IT, finance, agriculture, manufacturing, startup, or any other field, we can help you connect with an innovator you are looking for. Once innovation and entrepreneurship are connected, the next thing we do is for them to grow. And I'd like to show you an example. As you know, Wcit was held in India last year. India is one of the largest markets in the world. And there is a huge demand for innovations that make everyday living smarter and better. Taitra has been visiting India with many companies to see where they can contribute to India's digital future. And one of the companies we helped in entering the Indian market was called Money. And their innovation is an electric scooter ride-sharing platform using the latest ICT smart solutions, green energy, and automotive technologies. It's called UDA. U means you, and Da means reach, which means you can reach wherever you want to go. Smart mobility is a key part of smart cities, and the ride-sharing market in India is expected to reach $30 billion by the year 2030. Through our efforts, UDA found a partner in India, and they will be introducing their electric scooter systems to the country for ride-sharing across multiple cities. They are also planning to expand their services to city commute services, as well as solar charging stations, logistics, and on-demand delivery. The story of UDA began with a young entrepreneur, Ms. Gong, in Taiwan in 2017. Before I met Ms. Gong, she already has successfully deployed her innovation in Taiwan. But Ms. Gong has a bigger dream, that is India. Like many companies in Taiwan, to grow their innovation, they need to scale internationally. And India was the perfect destination for UDA's innovation. Ms. Gong was determined to go to the second most populous country in the world and to pursue her dream, a dream to help solve India's challenges of pollution, traffic congestion, and need for a new type of mobility. It's been estimated that in the United States, traffic congestion costs the country $360 billion every year. We don't know the figure in India, but I'm sure it will not be small. And that's not just traffic congestion. How about pollution? So if Ms. Gong succeeds, her UDA system will help India a lot. And we are also trying to raise funds for Ms. Gong. So if you are interested, you can contact me. There are many companies like UDA that my organization has been assisting to connect their dreams with the world. They have an innovation that they know will help make the world better. And we help them to meet and connect with international partners. And from their own world, they can create their own virtuous circles that drive new industries and new channels of commerce. And you can see some of their innovations at our Taiwan Excellence Pavilion and Smart Taiwan Pavilion, right here at Wcit 2019. And here is a 30 seconds quick preview.
Perseverance makes perfect. Taiwan Excellence.
Thank you. In Armenia, the spirit of innovation is everywhere, and the spirit of entrepreneurship is everywhere. The same goes for where I come from. And during my visit in Yerevan, my official escort from WCIT is Miss Neville Cassis. She is the CEO and co-founder of a startup company in Armenia, and she is only 23 years old, just like Miss Gong of UDA in Taiwan. And that's spirit of innovation and spirit of entrepreneurship. Neville, would you stand up and be recognized? Thank you. We know the great thing about the spirit of innovation and the spirit of entrepreneurship is that there are something that no one can take away from you. They are our most valuable natural resource. Innovation and entrepreneurship are our superpower. Ladies and gentlemen, we are embarking on humanity's great digital journey. We are living in an exciting generation where the world is acknowledging and appreciating what we do. The stage has been set. The whole world is watching. For everyone in this room, in terms of where we come from, we may be worlds apart, but that doesn't stop us from thinking alike. And in that sense, it makes us family. Our closely aligned values and ideals will always connect us and bind us together as partners and as a global family for innovation and entrepreneurship, a force for good that will change the world for the better. And I think that's why we are here. Thank you.
So let's get to know each other. I just want to start with the panel and everybody share who you are, what you do, and how you got to be in the position that you're in.
Hi, everybody. My name's Nina. I work at Index Ventures in San Francisco, and I also started Hive Ventures. It's a venture fund for Armenian startups. I got here because my parents sacrificed everything and moved from Iraq to California, where I was born.
Hi, everybody. I already spoke a lot. My name is James, and chairman of Taitra. Very honored to be here. Taitra is a global platform for Taiwanese business to connect with their partners worldwide. And our teams are very proud to be part of this year's WCIT 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Hi everyone, my name is Vahe. I'm a co-founder of Service Titan along with that gentleman over there. And we started the company because our dads were contractors and we wanted to solve a problem that they had, and it turned out that a lot of other contractors had the same problem.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ulili Anovatpuri. I'm a partner at Kapor Capital, a seed stage venture capital firm based in California. I'm here with my colleague, Kim Bardakian. Kim, I don't know where you are, if you want to wave your hand. Yay. Thank you for bringing me to Armenia. And how I got here by disappointing my parents and not becoming a medical doctor.
Hi, my name is Tom Trowbridge. I helped found Hedera Hashgraph and led it as president for a couple of years. I think I have to spend a moment on what it is. Hedera is a distributed ledger company. Think of it as a blockchain company. For those of you who are familiar with Hedera, with blockchain, think of us or Hedera as a Ethereum, but 1,000 times faster and 1,000,000 times cheaper. The network launched some time ago. It's already doing 10,000 transactions a second. That compares to Bitcoin at about 10, Ethereum at about 25. So it's fast, it's fair, and it's secure. We founded the company in 2017, and over the subsequent year, a little bit more than a year, raised 124 million from both insiders, institutions, and also in a accredited investor crowd sale. So the coin just started trading, and there'll be a lot to talk about with regard to that going forward. And I actually found the company via investing. I've been advising and investing in technology companies since 1996. Invested in the parent company Swirlds. Got to know Manson Lehman through that, and they asked me to come on board and help launch Hedera, which I did in 2017.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Caroline Winnett, the Executive Director of Berkeley Skydeck. We are UC Berkeley's startup incubator and accelerator. And I got to Skydeck after a career as a serial entrepreneur, which started out first as a concert violinist, then as an outdoor guidebook publisher, so a windy path to be a startup founder. So any of you startup founders that think you're not qualified to be a startup founder, I want you to absolutely put that notion right away right now. You can get there from anywhere. So how I got here today is that we have found incredible talent in Armenia. We've had several startups come from Armenia to our program. We also have advisors from Armenia, 2 of them here today, Lucine and Karen, who's sitting there in the front row taking my picture right now. And I'm really happy to be here and talk with everybody.
Hello everyone. Բարև ձեզ սիրելի հայեր. My name is Lucine Gazarian. I am a Chief Audit Executive of GoPro Corporation and VP of Finance. I left 25 years ago, Armenia, Yerevan, to study in the US and to work in London and US. It is my homecoming. It is the first time when I came back in a professional capacity. It's a pleasure to be here, to see all of you here, and it's a very emotional and rewarding trip for me. So thank you for having me here. As I mentioned, I left 25 years ago. I went to, did my MBA at UC Berkeley, currently advisor at Skydeck. And I specialize on mid-size and large-size companies that are planning to go public. I joined GoPro Corporation prior to GoPro's IPO in 2014. I worked with GoPro's founder, Nick Woodman, on the process of getting the company ready to go public. And I'm currently supporting all public company activities at GoPro.
All right, let's get down to the heart of the matter, and that's innovation and money. Now, a lot of people in this room are probably dreaming of being in the position that Nick Woodman and the people at GoPro were when they took the company public, and Mark Zuckerberg and so many others. But they're probably not dreaming of being in the position that the folks at WeWork are in over the past few weeks. This company was supposed to be the next big thing, go public, and it's really ended up in a disaster. and it's not going public. In fact, it may even go bankrupt, according to some reports. So let's just talk about first where the market is right now. Eventually, I want to make most of this conversation about what people sitting in this room can learn and take away and use for their own companies. But the news person in me wants to start with this. We have a huge wave all of a sudden of companies that can't go public, they can't seem to make it work, or they're looking at what's happened with WeWork and saying, no thank you, whether it's Postmates. What do you think this means for the market, Nina? Is this good news that some companies are putting on the brakes? Maybe not every company needs to go public, and in fact, I've talked to lots of founders who prefer to stay private. So what's up with the market?
So I think there's been a trend recently, which we've all been aware about, is just that there's so much capital chasing too few deals on the private side. I can tell you that oftentimes when we're looking at investing in a great company, that company probably could raise 10 times the amount that they want to raise. So what this does is on the private side, it balloons valuations and people stay private longer because they just have access to capital. I think for every company, the decision to go public or to stay private has to be a one-off discussion, right? It's not like a blanket statement. But I think right now what we're seeing is just that there's a disconnect between what private investors are willing to put up with and what public investors expect. In addition, there's a lot of new business models, right? Like this idea of Peloton, which is hardware and software. So some of these companies, it takes some time for the public market analysts to digest what's exactly going on and how they benchmark it.
And it's not just WeWork, Peloton you just mentioned. Also, Uber had a very disappointing IPO. It's gone down a lot since. So do you think that these are other opportunities for companies to maybe look and say, you're saying they're staying private longer, but is it in some companies' interest to just stay private?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, as a venture capitalist, my biggest job, I think, is telling people to not raise venture capital funding. Like, I want to invest in you, but I also want you to run your business the way you want to, and not all tech businesses are venture backable. And that's, I think, the big issue is that a lot of people are raising a lot of money, and it used to be that revenue used to be the benchmark in terms of how successful you were as a tech company. Now it's turned to be that how much capital you've raised is now that new benchmark. And so people are putting out these press releases when they raise, once they reach that $1 billion valuation with no mention of how much revenue that they have. And so I think it's really changing the perspective in terms of how we look at companies in general, and not having the benchmark or the goal to be to raise a lot of venture capital money and then eventually IPO. The benchmark should be to create a successful company.
Yeah, it's amazing. We had this word unicorns, startups who have a valuation of $1 billion, but now you have Minosaurs, the companies that have raised $1 billion, not just their valuation. You wanted to jump in, Tom?
Yeah, just one comment, and I don't necessarily disagree fully with it, but just to make a nuance on it. When we were criticized at Hedera for raising over 100 in our last round for a couple reasons, but people said, why do you have to raise so much? And there's a couple of reasons for it. One, our competitors did, and it sounds silly, but if we didn't, we would be at a disadvantage in terms of hiring, recruiting, and other partners wouldn't take us as seriously. So the fact other people did it, frankly, put the pressure on us to be competitive. So that's point one. Point two.
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
I mean, but isn't that a ridiculous reason just to do something, just to stay competitive? Doesn't that get you off your goal of what the heart of the company is?
Well, so that the capital is a means to get there, and so that's point one. Point two, you never know when the capital markets will close to you. And so our raise, most of it came between like April or May and August of 2018. We're a crypto company, right? So we were raising a SAFT, Simple Agreement for Future token, and selling tokens effectively. If we hadn't raised...
Before the Bitcoin crash.
Right as it was going down. If we had held off and waited or had raised less, forget about raising any money for the next year, and we would be at a material disadvantage. And so that capital at that time is why the company is, has a runway now of multiple years, despite having a disappointing offering, which I can talk about. And so I guess what I'd say is, you don't know when the capital markets will turn off. WeWork just found they turned off, right? So, their burn rate has to adjust for that. But presumably you raise enough where you have multi-year runway. So I am of the opinion you take the capital when you can, because you never know what else is going to happen and what the future holds.
And not to stop you from your second point, and maybe something you can talk about, Lily, as well, Uber did just that. Uber, Dara Khosrowshahi took over the company and said, okay, we're going to wait. We don't have to do the IPO right away. Then, because some of the China-US trade war tensions really brought the markets down, they moved that IPO up and said, we got to get the capital while we can get the capital. Jump in, and then I'm going to go back to Tom.
So just really quickly, I think WeWork is a great example. I think that company raised way more capital than they ever needed. And what were they doing with it? They were throwing really awesome parties that I had a chance to go to. So, I can't be mad at it on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like there's an efficient use of capital. And I think that because raises have become so bloated, people have become less efficient in terms of how they're using their capital. And also, startup employees have come to expect these bloated salaries, where before there was the idea, there was the trade-off for if you were going to earlier stage company, you were getting equity in exchange for taking a smaller salary. We're investors in Uber, and so, I think there was also a forcing function of investors who had poured millions upon millions of dollars into the company, needing an exit, because we have bosses too and we have to show a return there. And I think it goes back to the point where they took a lot more capital than they needed to, and they just burned through a lot of it.
But I'm not sure, WeWork raised a lot. I can't opine on the wisdom of their spending, but if they raised half the amount, I don't think they'd be in a better place right now. Because the actual flaw, it seems like it's in the business model, not the amount of capital they raise. And so if you look at their cash burn, it's significant. If it was half the size, they raised half the capital, they would have half the burn, but half the capital to make that burn. So I'm not convinced. I think the WeWork is more of an example of an underlying business model problem that gets clouded in an excess capital raise, potentially.
I see Caroline. Caroline wants to jump in 1 second. Go ahead, Caroline.
So I'm going to agree wholeheartedly about the too much capital thing. And particularly for WeWork, the other factor was the capital was concentrated in one major investor. And I think that is
SoftBank.
That is a bad thing for the market. Not anything against SoftBank.
And in case you don't know, SoftBank, it's a Japanese fund that's investing huge amounts in companies like Uber and WeWork. A huge amount is an understatement.
Right. So there wasn't the competition by the startup for capital in the market, and the intensive vetting that has to happen to make sure if this is a startup that really should be invested in. So that didn't happen. The other thing to keep in mind is that, in my view, WeWork is not so much as a startup, a traditional startup, in that it made a product. It's a brand. It's just a brand. Now, when I say just a brand, brands can be incredibly powerful and valuable in their own right. But the long-term work of building that brand obviously didn't happen, because when things started to get a little dicey, people pull back. So the brand loyalty hadn't been built the way I think that the market and the investor thought that it was. So I think history will really give us the 2020 view, but right now it's looking like they went out to build a brand and they didn't quite get there.
I want to bring in Vahe for a second.
But I would just pose the question, is WeWork even a tech company? There's a lot of conversations around them.
That's a great question, because I look at WeWork and I'm saying, where's the tech? People renting office space has been around for a long time.
But beyond that, there's a lot of specific, let's say, details about WeWork that I think makes it very difficult to then extrapolate it to the broader tech system and make any sort of projections in terms of what is right or wrong. There's a lot of special things about that business that I think make it not really worth conversation.
So, Lucine, I could say that this is an example of the markets working. They looked at something, they evaluated it, we got close to the IPO, there were more eyes, more tech journalists like me saying, hey, take a second look, and so maybe market forces and journalism are working the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, I do agree, and I wanted to follow up on Tom's comment about fundamentally there are potentially challenges with their business model. There are also, I think, opportunities for them to improve their governance and their readiness to be public. I think going public through IPO process, whether that's IPO or direct listing, is a great milestone. There's a lot of pride taken in achieving that, but is the company fundamentally to be ready to be public for a very long time, and everything else that comes with that? And that's a question that I don't think they answered.
Yeah, I guess people look at should we stay private, and private actually masks a lot of corporate governance gray areas, let's just say. So being public, we may not be ready for it, but that invites a whole bunch of scrutiny that you don't have as a private company. So there's actually positive corporate governance reasons to go public. I also just want to return to your point earlier. The one key component, I think, is investor diversification. And you understand why WeWork took this money from SoftBank, because it's the highest value they could get, and they had a great bond, great. But if you take all your money, or you have a concentrated investor, it doesn't matter what happens, you are working for that investor.
And that's exactly what happened with WeWork. Yeah. Eventually, the folks at SoftBank over in Japan said
no more.
Adios to the CEO and put in their own CEOs in his place.
Exactly. So at our first round, we made sure everyone was capped at $1 million, so nobody had outsized influence over our early rounds in terms of governance, which I think is important to do.
Okay, so now I want to get to the audience, because I know that so many people, like the 23-year-old CEO of her company that James mentioned, are wanting to know, what can I get from this conversation? What do I need to know? So getting to those fundamentals that you were talking about, let's talk about what you look for in a company when they're pitching, or what you know from having pitched a company being a founder. What do you look for, much like when we saw the people, you were in the jury right now in the lightning rounds. So when somebody's up there, is it all about the fundamentals? Is it just about the presentation? Is it 50-50? I'd really like to go down the line and see, when you make that initial elevator pitch contact with a company, what is it that you want to have in that 1 minute?
Look, I think as a venture capitalist, one of the things I always remind myself is that really, like, the entrepreneurs are the true heroes here. They're the ones doing the work. They're the ones sacrificing their time and money, and oftentimes go through a lot of years of just, not knowing if their idea is good. So we feel very privileged oftentimes to hear and have the opportunity to back some of these companies. I don't ever judge a company based on their pitch, because somebody could be a phenomenal public speaker, but have a terrible business idea.
Theranos? Anybody?
Yeah, and so there's 3 things I look for. One, for the founder, it's just clarity of thought and the ability to articulate their vision. Why are they excited about what they're doing? Second, self-awareness. So a lot of times, you're doing a job for a first time as a CEO, and you have to learn tons of roles that you've never had to do before. So just being self-aware about how quickly you can learn. And then third, of course, is this a critical pain point in a very, very large market?
A critical pinpoint.
Pain point.
Okay, so explain that.
Can your customers live without your solution? Or, as we were hearing from the Service Titan guys a few days ago, they had a small group of customers that would absolutely, die if they turned off their product. So something like that.
That's the pain. Once they have you, they can't live without you. James, what do you look for in a company? Has somebody ever come up to you and you said, this company's had it, and that's the company that's gone on to flourish?
Well, I have to say that pitch is always the most difficult barrier for startups from non-English speaking country, because you have to transcend language barriers and cultural barriers to be able to communicate with your host. And we spend a lot of time in Taiwan training our startups. And I can tell you it's not easy. You have to understand the culture and values of the other side to get your pitch right. But if I may, just a few words on IPO and capital, because companies in my part of the world tends to be very conservative, and many successful companies, they rather not go public. So there's so much money in the market, in the society. But the problem is many SMEs and young startups, they do need capital to grow. So what we did was, not long ago, we lowered the bar for startup companies in Taiwan to go public. And that's the way, I think that's the right direction for us to help our startups to grow, given there's so much money in the market.
Vahe, as a co-founder of a company like ServiceTitan, what mistakes did you make, and now you've learned and you know not to make those mistakes in pitching your company, because it never stops pitching your company. Even if you're Mark Zuckerberg, you're constantly having to reshape and reform that pitch.
Oh man, we'll be here all day if we're going through that list. For us, I would say it really came down to getting closer and closer to our customers, because I would echo what Nino said. At the end of the day, it's all about product market fit. Once you hit that, everything else is pretty straightforward. So the one piece of advice I would say is to just stay as close to that as possible and try to get to the point where it doesn't need to be at large scale. You could prove product market fit at a fairly small number of users or customers. But the biggest, if I think back in terms of the biggest mistakes that we made, it was when we deviated from that. It's when we would sit in the room and for 3 months or 6 months build something without actually having any sort of feedback loop. And anytime we didn't get that instant kind of reaction from those that would be using the product, that's when things usually went sideways.
It was you, as you were watching the people up on stage with me, when Nina was in the jury, any feedback? You don't have to name names, but any feedback you'd have looking at those people, the presentation style?
Yeah, so I'm not like Nina, unfortunately. I'm very judgmental. So I judge you by your pitch, because to me, the pitch is indicative of how you go out and sell your customers. So 100% as the person, if you are the face of your company, you need to practice that pitch 100 times. So whether you're selling investors to invest in your company or your customers. So very clearly, you have, to me, I look for what is that 1 or 2 sentence description of what your company is. So if you go through a whole 3 minutes and we're still like, what do they do? That's not a good sign.
Yeah, and you saw that happen to me on stage a couple of times. I said, are you guys sure what the company is? Because I wasn't sure. I had an idea, I think, but I wasn't 100% sure. And so, for me as a journalist, when someone's pitching a story to me, I need to know what your company does in 1 line. If it takes more than 1 line for you to explain the company that you invented, it's not a good sell for me. Tom, what have you learned from pitching? Just last year you were pitching your company.
Well, I think the pitching never stops, and so I agree with that. I guess I'll share one lesson in terms of investment I didn't make that you already referenced, which is the dubious distinction of turning down Peloton at the seed round of about $5 million valuation. So far from perfect, and John Foley was very good at pitching his vision. To me, it just seemed like there were so many different things that could go wrong. You had to get the hardware right. You had to get the market right. And so, made that big mistake. I think the big thing that I would say is that you never stop pitching. And that's become incredibly clear around Hedera right now. Our coin started trading a couple of weeks ago. It's down significantly, over 2/3. Since our last round, which was over a year ago. I left the company several months ago, and I was always an advocate for building deep, broad relationships with investors globally and for engaging in education around the world. When you're in a DLT space, it's very specialized, it's very narrow, and it takes a lot of education. And the market is certainly down since the last round that we raised, but and it's down 30 to 70% in terms of the altcoins. But you cannot educate enough. You cannot be in front of investors enough. And if you don't do that, you run a real risk of the next round, whether it's private or public, just landing with a thud, which is what nobody wants.
Caroline, you've taken 2 companies, you've founded them, they've been acquired. What did you learn from that pitching process, and what do you look for when students are coming to you and pitching their maybe just ideas at that point?
So I'd like to say that we are really in the talent business. At the seed stage, the early stage, at our accelerator, we're looking for talent, raw talent, number 1. Number 2 is that talent in a person who has a burning, burning desire to solve a problem. And is that problem meaningful to them? Is it either their personal problem or a problem that's of someone they're close to or something that they really connect to in some way. So those fundamentals are difficult. You can't see those on a spreadsheet. It really is a person-to-person evaluation and discussion over time, which is hard to do when you're picking 25 companies in a space of 6 weeks, which is what we do twice a year. So that's number one. In terms of what else is there, we're looking for something that they're making that is really differentiated from what's already out there. If it's something that's not particularly differentiated, do they have a brand new insight about a market or a customer that nobody else has hit upon before, and can they bring that to market? And then I would say overall pitching, for you founders out there, clearly state the problem. Extremely clearly state the problem and who has this problem and how your solution will address that problem, and then how it's going to be difficult for anybody else to do what you're doing.
So do you want to hear that at the top of the pitch? Here's the problem, and here's how Samuel's company is going to fix it?
So these are elements of the pitch, right? They're going to come, there's more or less a sequence of here's the problem, here's our solution, here's what we're building, here's the market we're going after, this is the customer, this is how we're going to execute, this is the general amount of fundraising we need to do, and this is why you should invest in me, because I will solve the world's great problems and make you very, very successful. You really want to close with that big, big closing, rah-rah, join me in my quest. Young founders, or young companies, not young founders, because founders are all ages. All ages can be great founders. And there's actually, as an aside, data that shows that the founders who are not very young actually have the best outcomes. So again, those of you who think I'm too old for a startup, if there's anybody here, you can drop that notion right now.
And Lucine, you work for GoPro, one of my favorite CEOs I've ever interviewed, Nick Woodman, CEO of GoPro. Did he pitch you, or did you have to pitch them when you went to GoPro? How was the pitching process like, and what did you learn from that?
I have slightly different background coming from Deloitte & Touche advisory services as I came into the space. So I'm a professional consultant. You know, I went through 10 years in advisory services. I served mid-market, large cap companies that are looking at an exit, looking at a liquidity event through an M&A or an IPO. So pre-IPO services, M&A services, and also various process setting, functional setup. GoPro in 2012, 2013 was contemplating going public, but wasn't really sure that the CEO and the founder and also majority shareholder, Nick Woodman, wasn't really 100% sure that this is what he wanted to do. GoPro was on my target portfolio as I was at Deloitte, and actually I pitched as a consultant to GoPro the support that Deloitte could provide in pre-IPO services, and he pitched to me coming in-house and becoming one of the people on the executive team. So when I joined, I helped with the discussion around how the process could be structured, how the decision-making could be structured. I was not the only one. We had a whole team, pre-IPO team, but it was interesting because it was privately family-owned, primarily family-owned, with a couple of smaller investors, and it took a lot of conversations to really figure out this is what he really wanted to do. He saw that going public was going to potentially make the company too public and, you know, make some of the things too bureaucratic and too formal. And so he kind of went through that process of realization that, yes, he's ready to invest, because being a public company in the US and in the rest of the world as well is a very expensive way of getting access to capital. And so you really need to be very clear that you're ready to be a public company.
So it was the mutually beneficial pitch to each other. So if people are in the room today, we've talked about how they pitch, what you're looking for. What are the best ways for people in a country like Armenia that may not have the access to capital markets in the way that a company in the UK or the US has? What are the best ways for companies of this smaller size to go about pursuing money? So we can just jump into the conversation now. It doesn't have to be one by one. Go ahead.
So I would say, given where we are today in terms of the tools available and the speed with which you can build products, I would say the best thing any startup in the room could do is to demonstrate traction. is to be able to get to a point where they actually can show, hey, we have customers that love us, or to show a path towards getting there quickly. I think if you could do that, there's so much capital out there, and there's enough funds here that they will find you. So to me, the key has always been to be the buyer in the process and not the seller. And so if there's one thing to focus on, it's to accelerate the path towards product market fit and to get to the point where you could demonstrate that.
I see you nodding in agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I think investors like traction. So if you can show that, that's like, you know, a really attractive person in a nice outfit. It's you show the packaging that's there. The other thing that I would say is, you know, investors travel and you travel. So we advise our startups to follow the investors on Twitter because we often, like I posted that I was going to be at Wcit, and a couple of startups reached out to me beforehand. And so we say that is like use those unique touch points to meet investors outside their office, where you will have their undivided attention. Like it's really hard to get a meeting with me, but you know, here when I'm eating lunch or something, there's less distractions.
I can jump in. So we've made 40 investments in Armenian-led startups, and one of the things that I tell a lot of founders here is like, look, like you can reach anybody through like LinkedIn, email, social media. If you really want to, let's say there's a dream VC that's invested in your space and has your domain expertise, one really great thing is to reach out to other founders in their portfolio. Founders are so open to helping other founders that are especially earlier in their journey. So, you know, look at their portfolio, see who else they've backed. If there's a founder that was backed at a similar stage as you, reach out to them. I'm sure they'd be willing to help. And I promise you, no VC will ever say no to a meeting that comes through an intro from one of their portfolio companies.
Yeah, I think definitely even as a journalist, when a company reaches out to me and I see they're following me on Twitter, not just for my ego, but I think because you're doing your research, you know who I am. If you're reaching out to me and you call me Daniel instead of Samuel, I'm thinking you're not doing your research. So I think all of those things can be more than just tickling the ego, but a sign that they really mean business. I think you wanted to jump in, Caroline?
So speaking of pitching, I'd like to pitch my program because we are open to companies in Armenia. Berkeley Skydeck is open to companies in Armenia. In fact, we have one of our founders here, Kachik, the founder of Grow. So if you want to ask him about our program, you can ask him. It's a highly competitive program, though, so about 3% of applicants get in, but don't be dismayed. Do apply. But there are lots of growing resources. Nina's fund, the Hive Fund, there's a program at the American University of Amsterdam that Michael runs called EPIC. There's a lot out there if you hustle and look. And our advisor, Karin, is incredibly well connected. I would also recommend him as a great source of all of the resources that you can find as a founder here in Armenia.
What are the advantages that a startup or a company with an innovative idea has being Armenian? I think a lot of times, a lot of places say, oh, it's so hard competing against the US or the big countries in the EU. So when you look at an Armenian startup, what are those advantages that they might have over their competitors in other countries?
You know, I'm going to have Vi answer this question because they just opened an office in Armenia for Service Titan, and maybe you can talk a little bit about why you made that as a business decision.
Sure. I think one of the biggest advantages that you have being an Armenian in Armenia is that, you know, if you were to try to hire an engineer in San Francisco, you know, you could spend several $100,000, but over here, that talent is going to be much more accessible. And I would say the diaspora is probably the other big secret weapon here, because if you could get to the point where you are within striking distance of that product market fit, even though the country itself is fairly small, the network has access far beyond the borders. And so, you know, you combine that with the level of energy that exists here. I mean, I haven't been coming here for too long, but just in the last 2-3 years, every year there's huge leaps and bounds in terms of the progress being made. So I think the combinations of all those things really make it an exciting place to be a startup founder.
I know there are models that people can look at. I always think of Israel when I'm in smaller countries. Israel is this country that has basically no domestic market, so they immediately look to exporting their products, for instance. They can't sell to their neighbors a lot of the time, so they have to look much farther than even just their region, and they rely on, there's a lot of self-reliance there. They've created this kind of hub amongst themselves, and everybody's willing to help out each other, just like you were pointing to. So is a company in a place like Armenia smarter to look at a place like Israel than they are the US?
I would say Israel is the golden model. And so for a country like Armenia, like it's one of those, why reinvent the wheel? They've already demonstrated the path to success. And so I always encourage anybody that I'm speaking to, whether it's government officials or startups, like if we want to see how it's done, look at Israel, because they've definitely figured it out.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I think because there's different dynamics here where the local market is not as big, I think a lot of investors want to see, can your vision scale beyond Armenia? But also, times have changed so much in terms of being able to acquire customers sitting in Armenia. And so that has brought a lot of the barriers down. But I think what really helped Israel is they had a couple of exits very quickly. And if you think about it, that is absolutely critical for putting a company like Armenia on the map, because not only, for example, let's say employees work at a great startup here that has an exit. That is basically seeding the next generation of entrepreneurs, because when that exit happens, they've been trained by a successful company, and now they have wealth to take a risk to start a company. And so, we're still in the early days of exits in Armenia, but I think that will be a game changer.
And one of the things that's been the biggest takeaway for me, not just covering technology, but also just in terms of mentality, is Israel's embrace of failure. They have the chief scientist in Israel who invests Israeli tax money, takes people's taxes, gives it to companies, and unlike even the United States, where there's been huge scandal when you had a solar panel company that failed under the Obama administration, the chief scientist will call up that startup and say, Mazel tov, congratulations that your company failed. And when he first said this to me, I was like, are you high? What are you thinking? You just lost money. And he said, that means that we're that much closer to those people closing that company, forming another company, maybe failing again, and finally forming a company, seeing what works and being successful, and helping all of our other Israeli startups. So there's just this mentality, which I really think has played very well, beginning in the Israeli military, actually, where it begins, where they encourage trial and failure. And so I think that's something that a lot of places trying to emulate Israel can learn, especially in the smaller markets. How does somebody decide once they have somebody's ear like yours, okay, I'm going to be getting money? How do you make that decision about what the equation is going to look like? What percentage are you going to hold in my company? For so many people, this is just like, someone's throwing money at me. Yes, 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 and you don't really know. So what's advice that somebody on the panel might have about, okay, now getting down to business, even though you might just be so eager to say yes no matter what?
I would say research your investor. Because once you take money from them, it's really hard to go back.
It's a bit like a marriage.
Yeah, it's so...
But divorce might be easier in a marriage than
it definitely is. The legal entanglements of taking venture capital money, and there's some just shady VCs out there. Not on this panel, but out in the general ecosystem.
There's some sharks out there.
Yeah, no, there's sharks, and there are people who, we do social impact investing, and if you're building, I'm sure you're building the company because you're passionate about that thing, and you want to make sure that the investor is also passionate about what you're building, because they're more likely to keep that company intact.
So when you say research your investor, does that mean going to other companies that have been invested in by your investor and saying, how much, what percentage did they take?
Yeah, so one, definitely, I think Nina said this earlier, talk to other companies in the portfolio to see how that VC worked and if they had a good working relationship. And then two, to find out to make sure they invest at the stage you're investing in. And then three, to make sure they haven't already invested in your competitor. We've had people come and pitch us, and this is, to me, the biggest no-no, where a company will come in and say how they're so much better than another company, and that's a company I've invested in. And I'm like, ooh, this person didn't do their research. So I think just doing your research overall on a potential investor is a good thing to do.
And should you avoid your investor if they're invested in a competitor, even if you're willing to say positive things or neutral things about your competitor? Any thoughts on that?
We don't invest in competitors.
No?
No.
Caroline?
So we have a model at the accelerator where it's a standard investment in all the companies that get in, but we continually advise, and for that, we will not take a competing company in the same batch. We will take competing companies that are in different batches. But most investors will not take head-to-head competitors in the same portfolio. And then in terms of how do we advise companies when they are then raising a round after Skydeck, there's just a couple of basic things. Number, for valuation, how desperate are you for the money, right? What's your runway? In other words, how many more months can you survive without money? Number two, if you don't desperately need the money, what's the opportunity cost of not getting that money? What's a market you couldn't go after? What's a product you couldn't build and how valuable that is? And number three, echoing what others have said, the value of the dollar from the investor is directly correlated with the value of that investor, both in terms of their reputation and how much they can help you. So it can be worthwhile to take a bit of a hit on valuation if that investor is going to be an absolute rock star on your cap table and someone who can really help you build your business.
And the thing I'd add to that is that when we raised, I was surprised at the investors who promised a huge amount and delivered nothing, and those who didn't promise much but delivered a terrific deal. And so that is, I think, a very important thing, is investors can help you with recruiting, with customers, with employees, and also, very importantly, is signaling for later rounds as well, and that reputation, which is very important. But I mean, I'm still amazed at the missed expectations of some investors that we had, and so just be prepared for that. It's also why you should always have multiple investors in every round, which is also where you get your valuation a bit, and you make sure investors work well together by not having just one in any round, but making sure they work well together.
So it's just like they say, don't put all of your money in one pot, don't take all of your money from one pot. Vahe, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. One, I think this goes back to the value of investing in a network of other founders, because going back to your question of how do you know if it's a good or bad offer, that's really going to be your best resource as a founder to get that input. And then the second, we've raised 4 rounds, we've raised over $300 million, and in every single round, we did not go with the biggest offer. Because for us, what mattered way more was the quality of the partner and the value add component than the one who's willing to write the biggest check. And so to me, that's much more important than trying to maximize valuation.
So it wasn't just what they were going to deliver to you monetarily, it was the type of support that they were going to give you as well?
Well, it comes in a few different flavors. One of them is just you need to emotionally connect with the investor, because it really is like a marriage. Like in some ways, it's even a bigger commitment than a marriage. But secondly, it's about what beyond capital can they deliver, and whether that's in the form of just support or it's in the form of recruiting or connections or introductions or any of those things. Typically, in today's market, there's so much capital out there that as a company, especially if you're in demand, that's where you're going to win, is to find an investor who can bring that value add. And the other thing that happens is, like for us, when we did our Series A, most of the value we got was from the amazing brand that we got the Series A from. We had, the quality of our hires and everything else. We had people tell us they specifically came to us because of the investor that put the money. The signal that sends is hugely powerful for a startup.
I'll just say 2 tactical things. In general, you don't want to give up 20% of dilution in each round. That's just like the soft number that is the market average right now. And
you don't want to give up
more than 20%. So 20% is like the average dilution of giving up in each round.
I like the specifics, Nina.
Second of all, if any seed investor asks you for like a 5-year financial model or projection and is going to make their investment decision off of that, just run the other way.
Elaborate on that.
Because like when you're a seed stage company, again, it's all about some of the fundamentals that this panel has already said. Like, are you a founder that's passionate? Can you clearly articulate your business? Are you solving a mission critical pain point in a very large market? You don't have a lot of financial numbers at the seed stage. So anyone that's going to ask you for like a 5-year projection and make their investment decision off of that probably doesn't know what they're doing.
And Caroline, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, two things. So there's an exception to every rule, and the exception to the one investor rule can often be if the investor is a strategic, in other words, a corporation that is in the industry that your startup is in. That's what we did with NeuroFocus. We funded it ourselves in the seed stage. That's an interesting story, but worked out well. And our first and only investor at Series A was Nielsen. You got to make sure there's no competitive issues in there, that everything is completely open source. They ended up acquiring our company. The second thing I would say, is what Nina said. With the abundance of capital, there are a lot of rookie investors. They may not be bad intent investors, but they just don't know what they're doing yet. And they'll ask for things like a 5-year projection for a seed stage company. So find out the track record of your investor. How many investments have they made? And most important, get the cell phone numbers of some of the people in their portfolio companies. Do not skip that step, ever, and find out how they are treated by that investor.
So just to disagree with one of those points, the strategic investor early on, I think, is very dangerous. And I'm glad it worked out, and that's terrific, but that actually can both put you under the microscope with that company. You can be subject to corporate politics, number one. Number two, it can diminish the value of an exit, as other groups in the industry just assume your strategic investor is going to acquire you, and if they don't, it's because they have more information than the outside companies, and so they're less likely to bid for it. So I'm very reluctant to take strategic capital unless it's very late stage and very close to a public offering of some kind.
The exception to the exception
Fair
of the
enough.
rule.
No, I agree.
Wait, say that again, Caroline?
She said, exception to the exception.
Yeah.
I would say if you're taking strategic money, you need to be very careful about what the term sheet looks like, because a lot of strategic investors will want right of first refusal. So if you sell, you have to offer it to them first. They'll want special access to IP. So just be very, very careful. Have very, very good lawyers if you decide to take strategic capital.
I'll just add a couple of points. I think maybe to bring it a little bit home to the Armenian startup ecosystem, I think you need to be really clear what is it that you want from the VC or an angel or a strategic investor. I agree that we have a lot of similarities with Israel. I work with several companies, American companies that had acquired Israeli companies. What we have as Armenians is similarly with Israel as a very large and accomplished diaspora. I don't think we fully utilize those resources, but it's a huge opportunity. The other aspect of that is when we are a small country landlocked with just a very nascent, very early stage of maturity in our ecosystem, very promising, but we are also sometimes desperate for that first investment or a signal that an external investor, a VC, from the US or somewhere in Europe, for example, believes in us. So we go for money rather than what is it that we exactly want above and beyond money. So do we look for the network? Do we look for support internationally, through explosive growth? Do we look for very key metrics that we want to accomplish to help us as a startup founder be successful in the next rounds? So sometimes I see in discussions with the various startups, especially coming from Armenia, we overly focus on the funding aspect of it and just giving away too much too early.
If there's anybody who has any questions, feel free to raise your hand if you're an entrepreneur. Anybody? No? Come on down. Yeah. I would, but I think I might fall. Oh no, there's stairs there. I'll come over. Just tell us who you are and...
Hi, my name is Annie, and I have maybe an amateur, very basic question about startups, but being an entrepreneur, where is the best place you can learn terminology and the process of beginning to work with an investor? There's a lot that you can read on, you can learn, you can speak with people, but where do you get educated as an entrepreneur on how to start a conversation and learn the language of an investor?
I mean, Y Combinator has amazing resources. You just go to YC, they have like everything from how much, equity you should give to your co-founder to what the, investment ranges are in terms of dilution. They explain all the terms of what's the difference between a safe and a convertible note. I mean, there's so many resources. I'd say that's a great place to start.
Y Combinator.
Yeah. I would also say VC Deals by Brad Feld. That's like the textbook we give to all of our interns at Caper Capital.
That also, Secrets of Sandhill Road by Scott Cooper.
I'll put this out on my Twitter account, at Samuel H. Burke, to make sure everybody can go back and read those resources. Question? I'll come to you. Or maybe I should have you come up here for the cameras. Come on down. Or up.
Yeah, hi. I just had a small question. How can we, think of to sell shares or not to sell? I mean, what is the verge to decide? Like, my company is 4 years old and I need around 20K or something. And I'm like, I know that in 2 years I will cover this 20K. So shall I sell shares or take some money from other resources or just keep it as it is? Like, I don't know, I'm sorry, I couldn't make the proper question. Like, if I have a company that needs money, how can I know that I need to sell shares or get other money or, some routes to do this?
Is the question?
Yes, is the question what is the ways to calculate or to think of selling shares when you need money?
You mean giving away equity rather than selling shares in, let's say, a public market? Okay. So.
Or like primary versus secondary? Oh, yeah. I mean, in terms of equity versus debt in a startup scenario, number one, good luck getting a lot of debt capital. Secondly, I mean, the dynamics around having to pay that money back and having that additional burden on your cash flows when you're likely going to need more capital down the road. I don't know if there's people doing it now, but that's fairly rare to even have access to debt, much less use that as a viable option.
I'd also go into certainty and to what return do you expect that capital to generate and how certain are you that it will do it. So if you are completely certain because there is a contract that you have signed, but you need working capital to get it done, you can take a loan, maybe you take a loan to fulfill the working capital required for that contract because you know with a high degree of certainty it'll be fulfilled and you'll be able to pay it back. If that's not the case, it's just an investment that will help you generate more business over the longer term. That's a very different risk and a very different profile that is probably less suited to debt, would be my guess.
Just remember, in an exit, the debt gets paid back first, and then everybody else. So important to recognize.
And you said you wanted to exit soon, right? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, she said you're saying that you want to exit soon? She's asking. No.
I need a partner or investment. I'm thinking and I need...
Looking for a partner or investment, enjoys long walks on the beach.
Or alone. I'm thinking to do this.
Any other words? That's it. Okay. All right. Good luck. Do we have time? Oh, no. They're cutting me off. I'll grab you afterward and get someone to answer your question. I really want to thank the panel, guys. Thanks for jumping in and answering the audience's questions. I really appreciate it. So thank you to the entire panel.
Stage, Samuel Burke from CNN and transitioning. To be followed by Ivo Bolsons, the SVP and CTO of Zinix. Please, a round of applause. Dmitry Fedjikov, Head of Data Service at Soft Construct. Welcome. Javier Garcia Gomez, the CTO of Europe for Ericsson. Ashot Hovanessian, sorry sir, apologies, CEO of Synergy Energy Systems. And finally, last but not least, Eno Vine, co-founder and president of Instigate Design.
Me too.
That's your wonderful panel. But finally, we have our keynote speaker, the COO of VMware, is Rajiv Ramaswamy.
Samuel. What's it over there?
The title of this panel, CIOs and CTOs. And right away when I saw that, I thought, well, what exactly does that mean? Because in every company, it can be different. Chief Technology Officer, Head of Engineering. But these panelists are the type of people who can tell us exactly what it takes to not only get to the top of the company, but what they're looking for people in their company. Now, ladies, you'll notice there's a problem on stage. It's all men. And one of my rules, having worked for Christiane Amanpour, one of the most famous journalists in the world, one of the first women to be a television news correspondent, I usually refuse to do panels with just men. But somebody on here...
Yes, Sam, I think you have a good excuse that in my company there are more than 50% women.
And there should be more than 50% women on these panels. But somebody brought up a good point. This is why we need more women in engineering. And I'm somebody who's been very lucky to be brought up in CNN by such a strong female leader, and I've been the beneficiary of incredible leadership from women. So first, I apologize to all the women in the room. And second, I'll say it is proof. And with just men on stage, we're not going to get anywhere. We need women. And it is just proof that technology needs to change and that the doors need to open up more for women. So we will address that topic more. I will want to open this up to the audience like we did in the last panel. So as you hear things, if you agree, disagree, have more questions, be thinking of that at the end. We'll want to bring you in. But first, I want to bring Rajiv to the podium to do the keynote for this. He's, of course, the COO of VMware, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a golden era for technology. And by the way, it's a golden era for women in technology. We need more women in technology in general. I've been in the industry about 30+ years, and I've never seen a time where tech is as relevant to the core and heart of every business than ever before. Technology provides massive opportunities for enterprises to transform, but creates challenges as well. There's a natural tension between the choices that technology provides, right, and the complexity that we have to deal with as we bring in new waves of technology. And this can overwhelm us if we're not careful. So as technologists, what do we have to do? We create the choice in the first place, but yet we also have to manage all the diversity and make it all work. So while all of this is happening, CIOs have now become the center of companies driving digital transformation. And digital transformation is the same as business transformation. So it's no wonder that 4 out of 5 CIOs believe that the role of the CIO is much more important than ever before. No surprise. So what are CIOs being asked to deliver? When we talk to customers, we hear consistently that IT is tasked with driving revenue growth, number one, customer satisfaction and retention, protecting the brand integrity, resiliency, and finally, Empowering employees, employee engagement, employee retention, employee productivity, these are all top of mind for every company. But often, the rest of the business doesn't really know what it takes to make all of this stuff happen. They just assume, they want their apps to work, they want everything to be up, and they just want everything to be easy to use. So who's going to go make all of this stuff work? Who's going to go build, run, manage, connect, and secure every one of these business assets? The answer is really, of course, you and we all as technologists. Our own CIO, Baskaya, likes to say, you have to be the visionary and drive the transformation inside your companies. But at the same time, you have to make sure that your Wi-Fi is working. You have to keep the lights on. So the job of a CIO has, of course, become a lot more complex than ever before. I'd like to spend the rest of my time talking about how we as an industry and as technology leaders can address the current day challenges here so that we deliver for today, prepare for tomorrow. So applications are everywhere and driving businesses and become the heartblood of the business. What do CIOs care about? CIOs care about these three major superpowers: cloud, mobility, and security. These are major superpowers if we can harness them properly to get the flexibility we need, but not be overwhelmed by the inherent complexity that comes with choice. So let's start with the cloud. You walk over here. So we live in a complex world. The cloud world is complex. It's got a lot of diversity built in. You've got applications, you've got infrastructure, you've got cloud services, and you've got operations on top. All of these are diverse. Apps are exploding. There's about 300 million apps today in the world. And by 2024, we're probably going to have something like 800 million. There's an app for everything, pretty much, these days. Not just increasing volumes of applications, but also a much broader set of applications that need to be managed, secured, delivered. You've got your traditional applications that you need to manage, run efficiently, figure out how to optimize costs, and deliver the performance that your business needs. At the same time, your lines of businesses and your application developers are building modern applications. These are running in cloud-native environments. Kubernetes is hot. People are building new apps with microservices, making use of new architectures. Great new capabilities, but also a lot more complexities. Most of us will be dealing with a combination of all of these apps when it comes to what we have in our enterprises. So we have increasingly diverse options in terms of where we deploy and run these applications as well. You can run your applications on your on-prem data center. You can run them in the public clouds. And increasingly now, these days, you're starting to see applications run in the edge. And sometimes, a single application can be run across all of these environments. Let's take an example. You're a modern shoe company. And what you do these days is a customer can go to one of your retail stores and custom order and custom design a shoe. By the way, Adidas did one for me recently. And the way this app works is you got the app running in a public cloud. You take measurements at the local store and you do some local processing. Goes back into the cloud. And once you have the order ready, you use your enterprise ERP system that's running in your on-prem data centers, and you place the order with your supplier. This is what a modern app looks like. It's running everywhere, in the cloud, in the edge, and of course, in the data center. And you have to stitch it all together. As you look at these new applications, you also can make use of a rich set of cloud services that are coming to bear here, being offered by all the major cloud providers. These cloud services are going to bring in lots of value into existing applications, but also enable new applications to be built very, very quickly. For example, machine learning and AI. You can go to the cloud, get a whole range of services, data services. And of course, with all of this comes data privacy, data governance. Where should your data reside? So AI and ML in particular are fairly early in their deployments. But you've seen other panels talk about the rise of machine learning and what that means to society overall. But this is, I think, exploding. We're starting to use machine learning almost in everything we do. Now, all of this stuff has to be managed. All of this stuff has to be operationalized. And increasingly, you're looking at a whole bunch of special tools, special skill sets, and different teams being trained to do all of this. Not an easy task for any company. So let me ask you, in this complex world, is this good? Is this bad? Is all of this innovation helping, or is this hurting? Is this chaos, or is this opportunity? Does the complexity of today's cloud options, provide new potential, or make it more complicated for us? Does it hold the potential to position us and empower us and inspire us? I think it can inspire and empower us if we manage it correctly. So many companies today are operating across multiple cloud environments. The average enterprise today runs applications in up to 5 clouds. But every one of these environments is different. You've got different operational processes, so operational inconsistencies. You've got different skill sets that your people need to operate across every one of these clouds, different management and security controls, inconsistent application service level agreements, and incompatible hardware and technology formats, all of which, again, add complexity. So how do we go play in this game? We must build for a unified cloud approach. Now, that doesn't mean you're only using a single cloud. You want to use the cloud that's right for your application. But we do need a consistent way to run these applications across all these clouds and operate the infrastructure. So consistent infrastructure allows applications to be run across multiple cloud environments without requiring application refactoring or application replatforming. This can be a pretty expensive task. One of our customers, for example, did a calculation of what it would cost to refactor a single application going from their on-prem environment, running natively in a cloud environment. And their estimate was it would take them $1 million to rewrite that app. Obviously, you can't do that to the hundreds and thousands of apps that are sitting out there in the enterprise. So you want to have an infrastructure that allows application portability and the ability for you to choose which cloud you want to run your application without having to make changes to those applications. At the same time, you also want to have a way to consistently operate across every one of these clouds, right? Consistent service level agreements to your customers, consistent visibility across all of these clouds, consistent cost management, consistent security policies. So really, that's the key to succeeding in this multi-cloud world. So while complexity might be daunting, those companies and technologists that can master this multi-cloud approach, they're going to own the next decade in cloud computing. So let's move on to the next topic, which is mobility. So connected mobile devices are exploding. Today, by the way, there's about 4 mobile devices per person, and people estimate that by 2025, we're going to have about 9 devices per person, of course, all of which are going to be connected. The other thing that's happening in the workforce is in about 5 years from now, 75% of the workforce are going to be millennials. Young people that I look forward to working with in my environment, but they challenge us in many different ways. These millennials want to work anywhere. They want to work remotely. They expect stuff to be delivered to them wherever they are. And most importantly, they come into the workplace expecting a consumer-like experience. They're used to consumer technology. They want similar or better technology to be available in the enterprises when they come to work. So attracting, retaining, and engaging this talent becomes a very critical priority for the enterprise. So what are the top 5 IT requirements when it comes to mobility? At the top of the list really is all about the user experience and user empowerment. So you've got to engage your employees. You have to make them productive. That's critical to retaining the talent. You have to be able to deliver applications anytime, anywhere, on any device. You're going to see a whole range of devices that people bring into the workplace. You're going to have your iOS phones, Android phones, MacBooks, PCs, Chromebooks, you name it. And you've got to deliver and manage all of this in a consistent way. Managing those devices, these are all bring your own devices in many cases, Yet, you need to manage those devices, make sure your enterprise applications and data are protected and secure. And of course, you have to manage the user experience. While you do this, the user experience still needs to be simple and consumer-like. And finally, all of this stuff has to be automated. If you want to run this at scale across thousands of users in your environment, in your companies, everything here has to be automated and scaled. So if you look at your environment today, I'm sure you have employees using different devices and different operating systems. Each has an app store. Each has their own update process. Each has their own set of services. And these are all silos. Much like we had silos in the cloud, you have silos when it comes to your devices that are used in the enterprise. And the only way you're going to succeed here is if you can abstract across all of these silos and create some level of consistency, both in terms of your ability to provide user experience, as well as in your own ability to manage all of this complexity. So the same kind of complexity here. You've got complexity on one side and choice, but you want to provide a consistent experience on the other side. So this is what you need, right? You need to have a consistent experience, but deal with heterogeneity, manage your costs, and provide security, all at the same time. And the only way you can do that is, again, by creating some sort of a unified intelligence-driven platform that works across and abstracts across every one of these different devices and provides that rich employee experience that everybody wants, okay? Provides cloud-based modern management to be able to manage all of these different devices at scale, right? Abstracts out each of these individual devices, provides the insights needed for enterprise administrators to go manage and secure the environment, and of course, delivers all of this with automation. This is, again, the way you get around these silos and make use of virtualization technology to really create an empowering engagement for employees. So the last big piece that I want to talk about here is security. Probably top of mind for most CIOs and CISOs. Why so? If you look at IT spend today, technology IT spend is growing at about roughly, call it 5% per year. A reasonable, healthy rate, growing at slightly above GDP generally. But if you look at how much we are spending on security, we are spending our budgets are increasing at about 10% per year. So we spend more and more. We're spending at twice the rate that we're spending on the rest of IT on security. Yet, what's happening to these attacks? The damage from attacks continues to escalate. This is an asymmetric battle. If you think about this, what's really happening? The attackers are trying new techniques every day. And they only have to win once for them to succeed and get your data and your precious assets. The defenders have to succeed every single time. If you make a mistake once, it's over, game over. So this is a very asymmetric battle. It's a tough battle to fight. Now, our most valuable assets are our applications and our data. What do they run on? Well, they run on workloads. They communicate across networks. They run on public clouds, private clouds inside your data centers. They run on endpoints that are accessed by users. This is what we're trying to protect. Now, the way you protect them today is by using this massive set of security controls. The average organization uses about 60 to 100 different security products. When I show this slide to my customers, some of them say, hey, I think I use every product on this list. Every product. This is as much a part of the problem as it is the solution. So how do we do with this, right? We have different security products for every point in that chart that I just showed. Different products for endpoints, different products for workloads, servers, different products for user machines, and for identity and in the public cloud. These are all very bolted-on products with a whole bunch of agents and appliances that you have to deploy, each with its own consoles, each with its own policy sets. And if you end up misconfiguring or misaligning across some of these controls, that's what happens in 90% of the breaches today. And you've seen some very big ones recently. It's also super reactive in terms of how we do. Imagine, would you want to focus all your healthcare on emergency rooms? that would be a total disaster. Right? You want to focus on preventive care. But what's happening in security? Most of the money is actually spent on reacting. And that's part of the challenge. Now, while we're doing this and doing everything in silos, the attackers are not thinking in silos. The attacker starts compromising perhaps a user identity, gets into a device, and from there accesses a workload, spreads across the network, and soon they're everywhere in the data center and they've gotten all your assets. So the attackers aren't thinking the way the security folks are. So security needs to be transformed. What are the challenges today? Well, today, most of the security is bolted on. What do? We build an infrastructure where the applications are running, and then we hand it off to the security teams and say, go secure them. And those poor security folks go off and bolt on a bunch of these security products, 50 to 100 of these, and try to secure it. The second thing is most security dollars, as I said before, are being spent on reacting to events after they happen. You've got an attack that's happened. I want to detect that signature, and then I want to prevent that attack from happening. But those dollars are spent on an attack that happened in the past. The attacker is going to change their stripes and not do the same thing again. They're going to try something different. So again, the reactive model doesn't quite work, right? Reverse engineering the attacks of the past versus trying to protect what's going to happen in the future. And then you've got these silos, right? Endpoint, network, workload, cloud, all of these operating completely differently and independently of each other. Think about it like if you had airplanes and an air traffic control system where everybody spoke different languages and didn't communicate with each other. That would be a disaster for the airline industry. We need a common language here across all of these silos. So where do we go with security? Well, this is where we need to go. Security needs to be built into the infrastructure. It turns out that the infrastructure, especially the virtualization layer, has a lot of awareness of what's running on it. Imagine the analogy is you're living in a house, and you know what happens inside your house much better than an attacker ever knows. If you see a light come on in your kitchen at 2 a.m. in the morning, you probably think, yeah, that's abnormal. Right? That's probably an attack. And so the infrastructure folks actually understand the applications that are running in the infrastructure, and therefore, you can absolutely figure out what's good and what's out of the norm. That's very powerful, and you can use that to secure and lock down things. And it's better to lock down what you know than trying to go after the unknown. Right? So if you know that this is what's happening inside your infrastructure, well, lock it down. Don't allow anything bad to happen over there. Right? That's the built-in model. The proactive model, right, moving from a proactive to reactive to a proactive model is exactly that too, which is understand what's going on, understand the known good, and focus on the known good versus going after everything that's bad. The analogy I'll make here is, if you were to use, for example, machine learning to go hit a golf ball, many of us play golf, versus trying to hit, say, a tennis ball. The golf ball is static. It's sitting there. That's your application. You know what it's supposed to do, and you've got to go figure out how to hit it. If you're trying to hit a tennis ball, on the other hand, it's always changing. The attackers are always changing, and it's much more difficult. You've got different rate, different pace, different spins that you have to handle. It's a much more difficult problem to tackle. So in general, you can be much more successful when a problem is known rather than going after unknown problems. The last bit, of course, is that you have to get rid of those silos, and you have to have aligned policies, a common language where all of these different pieces of the infrastructure talk to each other and have a consistent security policy that you can then protect your applications and your data. So you can do this, like I said, using components of the infrastructure. You deliver your applications on any cloud, on any device, and then you secure it using the assets that are already deployed. All these different teams have to work together to make this happen. But if we can do this, the results can be powerful, and you have a chance of reversing that trend that we saw in the very first slide, where security spend continues to go up exponentially, and our effectiveness at deterring attacks hasn't. You can completely reverse that equation. So, as technologists, and we look at these different three big superpowers of cloud, mobility, and security, how do we get all of this right? How do we get that flexibility that we want from a business perspective without getting overwhelmed by the complexity? Well, for the cloud, it's about creating consistent infrastructure and consistent operations across all of these clouds so that you can make the best and use every cloud that's available to you and make the best cloud, use the best cloud for the best application as you need. For mobility, it's about driving employee engagement, empowering employees, providing them a consumer-like experience, but with enterprise-grade controls. For security, it's about delivering that unified security concept, get ahead of the attacks, focus on prevention, focus on building it into the infrastructure, and focus on aligning everything across different silos. I believe this is the golden age of technology, and the future is bright. There truly has never been a more exciting time, and perhaps a more important time to be a technologist. Thank you. Samuel, over to you.
Thank you, Rajiv. All right, let's pick up this conversation where we started. So why are we all males up here? What's going on in this environment that you think that we end up with an all-male panel when about half the audience is female, something like that? Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think it starts with the source, I think, where if you look at universities these days, you have typically, at least in the US, I don't know how it is exactly in Europe, but in the US you have about a 20% participation of female students in engineering. And so that's where the problem actually starts. And I think one of the things we need to do is to explain better, I think, what the social impact is of some of the technology choices that we make, so to entice more female students to go into the direction of engineering.
And of course, I've seen a lot of my reporting. A lot of people see the bro culture. You heard about what happened at Uber, or you look up and you see an all-male structure and you think, where's the room for me? So that's also been a big part of what people are trying to break, a lot of female leaders in Silicon Valley. Ashot, I see you want to say something?
Yes, you would not believe, but I think in Armenia, women are dominating in IT sector. That's all
right.
You see, and not only like low-level jobs, but highly executive-level jobs. My COO is a woman, great person, great personality. So I think maybe in this audience there are many executives. I see one executive stand up. Yeah.
Irina.
Yeah, so I would like to add, it might also be more of a matter of age than of sex, because when I studied electrical engineering in Germany, we were 400, and out of those 400, 4 students were women. I think if we look at it today in the young generation, and specifically here in Armenia, you have about 50% plus of women in highly technical subjects. So it's mainly because we've progressed to the age of being allowed to this kind of a discussion, more to do with being male. I hope so.
Rajiv, I see you want to jump in.
Yeah, so there's one other point I want to make on diversity, which is we talk about, we'd like to have more women on stage. I think there's actually a critical business reason to do so. It's not just, so that we can have a mix up here. Fundamentally, the more diversity we have in the workplace, the more likely we are to embrace different ideas. Everybody is the same. You're all going to come up with the same way of solving a problem. You're not going to have the same level of creativity. So diversity for us, at least, is a critical business imperative.
Smart business.
Yeah, to contribute to that, I think one of the failures that we have had in this ICT sector, we have not been able to sell how attractive this business is, not just from technology. From outside, people see a bunch of nerds doing mathematics and physics and computing, when in reality, ICT is trying to solve the big problems of the world, like global warming, equality in education, equality of opportunities. Women, we are typically smarter than men, like to have a purpose. And we have not been able to sell that purpose. Say, you see the purpose of what we're doing in ICT, we are really behind solving the big problem, not just doing the technology things. And I think this is what is changing.
Why such confusion with the alphabet soup, I call it? CIOs, CTOs, I mean, is this just poorly defined, or is this something that's missing some type of uniformity in the tech industry? Because this is such an important title. I think that one of the most important takeaways that you can get from talking to these people is it sounds all tech, but as Richard Clark, the former national security advisor from the United States, pointed out today, talking about railroad companies, he said, we're a tech company that does railways. Same thing at CNN, even though people actually always say it was a startup who started there. I mean, cable news was something new, but we have the chief technology officer at CNN where I served for the past 10 years. So what's the difference between a CIO, a CTO, and a COO like you, Rajiv? What's the difference, Javier?
I think there is less and less different. I work for Ericsson, and we kind of merged the role of a CTO and CIO. The CTO is the Chief Technology Officer. The CIO is the Chief Information Officer. Today, sending information in long distance in telecom network is what we do for a living, right? So the boundaries of the traditional telco with the IT world are vanishing. When you build a modern network, you build that on the cloud. And the function of a modern network in telecom are living together with IT function. So we don't see the difference anymore. And actually what we ask for young graduates is to have that perspective, that the world is becoming very complex for that end. You need to embrace a lot of technologies. It's not about being yourself more specialized, it's being yourself wider in what you...
So I'd say that there's a pretty broad range of definitions on what a CTO does. You know, and we have CTOs that function in many different roles. Sometimes we call them chief talking officers because they're out there evangelizing, you know, what we do. Sometimes we call them chief therapy officers because they're out there working with customers and making them feel good about technology choices that they're making. But at the end of the day, I agree that the CIO, CTO roles are coming together, but technologists ultimately have to drive the transformation in their companies. And that transformation is accomplished through IT. So therefore, you know, this is all coming together.
I believe CIOs are more in the companies that are not IT. So they are people who manage IT departments, IT direction of a company, non-IT company. For IT companies, CTOs are the ones who are leading the company in technology, the way that they have to go. I think that would be maybe the difference between CIO and CTO.
For anybody sitting, no, go ahead.
From my side, it's CTO. It's mostly like operation guys because I'm talked about CTO from my position as head of data science. It's I communicate with him when I'm trying to solve some operation task. And CIO, it's these guys who are thinking a lot about strategical view of product, of how we can use strategical technology in our products.
I think the confusion might also come from the fact that there is no more central as much. Chief always also means central. And central technology officer, as it was in the past, is just not enough anymore because the world has become so complex that you cannot know at the same time about transistors, torque, and other things. You now need additional specialities, and one of those is information, which is basically an entire subject on its own. So you need several of those, and I think this is part of the trend towards decentralization.
Before we delve into what the big trends for CTOs are and for the industry, if you're a young Armenian or just a young person out here who's looking to get into this field or someone who's looking to move up in this market, what are you looking for the next generation of people that you're hiring? What types of attitudes, what types of resumes, what types of jobs, what types of personalities?
So I would value 3 qualities for someone who would like to become a CTO, for example. First, the first quality is to be up to speed with what is happening in the world in technology, to know all the trends or where it goes, and be able to understand which one is applicable to the needs of your company. The second is to understand the business needs, because CTO is not only one who creates technology. That technology has to meet certain demands and needs of your customers, your clients. So understanding business requirements, that is very important quality. And I believe the third quality is ability to inspire, motivate to people who will follow you. You have to be like a role model, an example that has authority because the person deserves that, not because has a chief name in that.
So that falls a lot under emotional intelligence, which
Absolutely.
I'm hearing more and more from bosses.
Exactly.
I can find many engineers, but I need to find people with EQ, not just
Absolutely
IQ,
right.
emotional intelligence. Javier?
Let me build on a short 3, and I will bring my 3. If I have to hire a new graduate, I will say, what are the 3 things that I expect from you? Number 1 is you have to love mathematics. Why is that important? I'm talking to an 18-year-old or 16-year-old person. Because then, if you love mathematics, you have an ability for abstraction. And it's about complex problems that we'll have to solve. That's number 1. Number 2 is you have to have passion on what you do, whether it's mathematics or something else. Because, as Ashok said, you will have to learn all the time about many things. You have to have the passion. It has not to be an obligation. It has to be natural. And number 3 is the most important. I always ask the question, why do you want to do this? What is your purpose? And again, it's the same point. Why do you want to build an artificial intelligence system? What is the purpose? What are your ethics? What problem are you trying to solve? Because technology per technology leads to disaster. Technology needs a purpose. And that's, to me, the third factor is the most important when you hire somebody.
Ivo?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, if you're an engineering student or you graduate, there are certain skill sets that every one of you has, and I just assume you all have them. But then if I look at where do I separate the ones that I really would like to hire, it is, first of all, it has to be people that have been demonstrating that they are not just happy with the status quo. They are people that are either have taken initiatives to change things in their university setting, in their student setting, that have really taken initiative. Secondly, it has to be people that can really explain what they are working on or what the merits is of a good idea. Because one of the key things that you need to do as a CTO in your company is to try to explain to your peers and your other colleagues why we should take certain risks, why you should take certain new technologies into consideration.
So communicating the goal.
Yeah, and do that in a way that you have a level of empathy for the people that you're dealing with. And that can be empathy for your customers, trying to explain to the customers why they should change technology. It can be explaining to your CFO why you need to spend more money on something. And of course, you have to also have the understanding of what their point of view is and what their priorities are. And that level of empathy is one of the, the things that I see that is missing quite often with engineering students. I don't think it's been educated.
Dimitro?
Yeah, and one thing I want to add, what I don't want to have in my colleagues and my employees.
Yeah, that's good to know too, what you want and what you don't want, again, like a marriage.
It's some kind, it's magical thinking. When I
say that again?
Magical thinking.
Magical
thinking.
Okay,
yeah.
elaborate.
It's, for example, if I try to okay, explain how it works, this or that workflow, technical pipeline, and someone start to explain, okay, on these steps we have this, and on these steps that, and after we have some magic, and yeah, it's not works. If someone try to explain something technical things using like magic happening, it's this magic models, magic AI, it's not working. It's
so you don't want someone who's going to lie to you or someone who's not realistic? They have to be realistic.
Yeah. It's, in this case, you're not engineer, you not understood what is working, and you don't really ready to use it. And this can be have very bad after on your products.
I would also add that this position requires a huge amount of ethics because the
ethics.
Let me explain. An engineer's job is maybe 20% making sure something works, and about 80% figuring out what can go wrong and prevent that from happening. That's really the main job of an engineer. Now, the CTO is typically the top engineer in the company, and they have to think more broadly than what can just go with a transistor. They have to think what can go wrong in general with the product on the business level, but even at the society level. And so I think there's a high level of actually philosophy required for somebody to really think through what can be the effects. Let's say if we decide as a company to burn down the Amazon, is that a good idea?
So you think that's necessary, not just philosophically, but also could be important to a business, that if you don't have somebody with ethics there, a deep understanding of ethics, that it could come back to be bad for your business?
Well, yes, of course. So there's no higher technical position in society than the CTO, because we don't have this kind of a position in government, let's say. So it's an ethical job of the companies to make sure that what we're doing works for the future of all of humankind.
Yeah, this has been a big criticism of Facebook, of course, that they were thinking about the ethics afterward, and they didn't have somebody there thinking about it before.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's not just the CTO that has to think about ethics, right? It's everybody in the company. When you do something, are you doing the right thing? And, often some of these things are actually caught by people fairly low down in the organization, and they have to be willing to speak up and challenge the status quo. If you feel that things aren't going right. So I think it's the responsibility of almost every employee in the company to take an ethical posture to what gets done.
Javier, did you want to jump in?
No, I was going to build on the same topic of, on the ethics that I mentioned before, because it's so important, right? And there cannot be ethical behavior if we don't understand what is the mission and the purpose of what we're doing, right? This morning, somebody mentioned Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project, right? And we were talking about the engineers working and doing their best to fabricate the bomb, right? But they have their own mission, right? From that perspective. I think that's why it's so important that when you work on something, you understand what is the end goal. If I work in this business, it's because I want to believe, and I do believe, that ICT will solve the main challenge of humanity, which is global warming, right? And our technology and our platform will enable that, right? If I think that what I'm building will help for the Chinese government to do espionage of their citizens and to basically label who is a good citizen of a bad citizen, I will not work here. And that's the way that this ethical behavior spread out in the company, by having a very clear mission of what you want to solve.
Ashot?
I may move from ethical to other aspects, but I would like to highlight another important quality of the CTO. I think CTO today has to see what company is going to be in terms of technology in 3 years or 4 years' time from now. That's the vision CTO has to have in terms of technology. That happened to me. My CTO came to me 4 years ago. We were looking because we realized we have to be highly scalable. To scale up, because we were getting into markets with much larger data and speed that has to be all these data processed. And he said, if we don't do it now, microservices, if we don't do it Kubernetes now, our company, in terms of technology, is dead in 3 years' time. After 3 years, we are not dead, because I listened to him, I trusted, and we moved into these areas. And today, he is coming to me about, hey, if we don't do AI, we are doing, in fact, but if we don't do, then in 3 years' time, we will not be so valuable, because the things are moving in that.
So it's not just about solving the problems that are in front of the company, it's solving the problems before they become problems for the company.
Right.
Yeah, you know, on that, I think one of the things you have to realize is that these senior levels, you don't have clarity. You know, you don't have crystal clear clarity on what's needed 3 years down the road or 4 years down the road. So you have to be willing to make decisions with a set of uncertainty. And frankly, if the decisions were straightforward, somebody else would make the call. If it were all that clear that you're going to have to do something X, Y, Z, somebody below you would have probably made the call. And so at your levels, typically at a senior level, you're really making, part of the challenge is to make decisions knowing incomplete information and not having certainty and being able to place those bets. And those bets can actually change or influence how entire companies go forward or not, right? So big responsibility.
And, you know, just to close this topic, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. I would like to comment on both of the things that you just said. Everybody, of course, has to be ethical. However, we have the saying in German, the fish rots from the top, right?
Absolutely.
So basically, in the top positions, we are in a role model kind of position, and we cannot expect some people in the organization to behave ethically if we don't. So we have to for sure basically go first, and also if we don't have the information and we have to make, let's say, gut decisions, then I just propose to err on the ethical side.
Sure.
Before we move into what the big trends are, and Rajiv set out some of them for us in the keynote, I want to first know what you're moving away from. What are jobs that are maybe starting to die out, or technologies, focuses that you no longer have in your industries as you move toward AI and the others? What's something that's probably not a good thing to be on the job market for right now in this space?
I will start by saying that if you become highly specialized on something, you will become obsolete very soon, right? So I will dare to say that high technology specialization is not a good way, because technology moves so fast that you have to become more a user of multiple technologies. So you are capable to understand multiple data models and use contribution from bots and from machines, then you become more valuable, because that task of highly specialized data analysis done by humans will be replaced by machines. So I think that one part of the job that is changing is that people that spend their life studying one part of the specification of the protocol, those knowledge will be replaced.
Maybe they need to know how learn to learn. It's more best things.
Learn how to learn.
Learn how to learn.
In other words, you've got to be willing to change constantly. Got it. And go ahead, Rajiv.
No, I was going to say, yeah, like to reiterate somebody else's points about, you know, yeah, in tech you have to change consistent all the time. There's change happening. I want to give you just an example here, right? So if I talked about cloud mobile security, but if you'd asked me 3-4 years ago, right, we were poo-pooing the public cloud. We said Amazon was the #1 enemy, right? And you know, we realized that actually this was real, and we embraced it, right? The big change was saying, we said that this is, you know, we want to fight it, to we want to embrace it. And today, you know, we've made significant shifts as a cloud company. So you have to be willing to change your perspective on things, and that's going to be critical to success, right? Otherwise, you're just going to be, you know, left behind.
And Amazon's a threat because of the cloud computing?
Yeah. Amazon is a major provider in cloud computing, and #1 today in cloud computing.
Biggest cloud provider in the world.
Yeah, and we decided to partner with them versus fighting them. That is a big change.
And when you look at what the biggest trends are, if somebody's in this room today thinking, okay, what should I be studying? What should I be focusing on? Ivo, where would you tell them to focus on?
Well, I think there is certain kind of tectonic shifts happening, I think, in our industry. And coming out of the silicon industry, where you built these little gears of the gearbox that make the whole machine run, one of the things that is clearly happening is that Moore's law, which means the traditional improvements of speed and scaling and have your CPU continuously being faster, that's gone. It's over. So if you believe that, you know, trying to, you know, write traditional software tools and solutions targeting the traditional CPU von Neumann architectures, I think, you know, you're not prepared for the future. I think this conference probably is the right place to kind of announce that, you know, the almost the dominance of the CPU in compute is over. The C is gone. We are talking about XPUs, we are talking about GPUs, we are talking about TPUs. And that means that you need to think about how you write software for these kind of heterogeneous platforms that are not as uniform anymore as you have been used to. And so that's definitely, in my opinion, a really big trend that if you do not handle that and can cope with that, all these great future stories about scaling, you know, the systems and the software and continuing to improving, it's not going to happen, you know, just relying on that technology.
CPU is dead, you heard it here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Maybe I am totally agree because from deep learning. And yes, last time we very often use some kind of accelerators, not only GPU. We playing with Movidus, Coral this year. It's very interesting, amazing technology, and can be in future. It's good for us. It's very fast and improvements for our deep learnings. But if you start playing with this kind of things, you need to remember about data structure, data algorithm, how to use paralleling your software, because in CPU time we completely lost this knowledge.
So just on that theme, while we're on the theme, so I'd say that I would not say the CPU is dead, but I would say that applications, specific applications are driving the demand for adding a lot more co-processing, whether you look at AI, ML applications that are demanding the use of GPUs or network offloads. But there's one fundamental trend there to add to what you said, which is I think over time, everything is going to be available over the network, right? Your offloads are going to be available over your network. Your GPUs are going to be available. Your co-processors are going to be available. Your memory is going to be available over the network. And that's going to change how computing is done.
Yeah, I think that is a more radical transformation that we are facing, the distribution of the compute in the network. Today, when you use any application in your mobile phone, you have basically two CPUs. One that is in your mobile device, one is in the application server far away. The wall we are building will distribute those CPUs across multiple points in the network, in a regional data center or in a data center that could be in a base station very close to the user. Why we're going to do that? Because we want to have one single distributed, highly capable computer, right? Where application developers can write the code and use efficiently. Today, when you write an application, you have to use the APIs of Apple or Android and the APIs of Amazon, for instance, to onboard your app. Tomorrow, you want to be sure that you onboard application in any network and you can distribute that efficiently. Why you want to do that? Because you want to use cheaper devices. You don't want to have very expensive CPU like VR goggles that require very expensive GPU and CPU computing. You want to stack that from the Googles. You want to run that in the cloud very close to where you are. But to do that, you need to have extremely low latency, which is the delay of sending information back and forth to the network. So you do need to have an excellent connectivity, which is called 5G. That is what 5G is about, right? One of the many things. So we are transforming that paradigm of having a CPU to have a multiple distributed computing that in essence is one single big computer.
Ashton?
Yes. I would like to get again to the point of what is important for people to go into new area. I believe I would not be very unique if I say data science is maybe the most important at this moment to get into. The reason being, now so much data has been collected and available that there is more data than you can absorb or do anything, any meaningful thing with all this data. The only way to handle it, you have to really make smart system to better understand what are the correlation between data, what are the trends in the data, how you can mine this data out of all this. I was doing myself artificial intelligence 37 years ago. I did my PhD in artificial intelligence.
37 years ago, you did something on AI?
Right, there was still that. The problem was at that time.
I want to see your stock investment portfolio.
Now everybody knows how old I am, right? The problem was that there was no data at that time. And data were fragmented, autonomous, local, and you could not get enough data to make meaningful analysis out of this. And that brought AI into dormant in 90s. Only after data become now commodity, so much data, suddenly everybody realized that now is time to do the same methods that have been already developed 30 years or 40 years ago, now, and apply them. All these statistical methods are not new. They are old, but they are applicable now. So I think now is time to make systems smarter, to make decisions. Otherwise, we are swamped with all this massive data, and we will not know what to do with them.
You know?
I think the world has become too complex and is moving too fast that I would actually dare to tell somebody like what to study, because they will have to live with that decision for 50 years or so in their professional life. The one thing that we know will not go away is basic engineering, basic, let's say, electrical, mechanical, physical engineering, and also basically teaches a certain thinking, an engineering thinking. And I think that would be a wise decision to do something like that, because first of all, it will always be needed, and secondly, it teaches the basic thinking to later on learn some other specific skills which might come and go for quickly, like technologies mushroom for a few years and then disappear. But if you're a basic engineer and you understand basic engineering type thinking and methodology, then you can probably adapt to that more easily than if you've learned something very specific which is now no longer applicable.
On the AI topic, I have to, a slight variation on what you said, which is 30 years ago, I agree, a lot of the algorithms are still coming back, right? The same algorithms that we learned 30 years ago with neural networks and deep learning are coming back. The challenge was not just availability of data, the challenge was lack of compute power. There was a time where I remember, the big thing was, could a computer beat a human in chess or pick a game of your choice? Today, that's not even a debate, right? I mean, there's no doubt a computer will beat a human, any time, right? And it's just the fact that compute power has just become so abundant. So that's a massive change. But the challenge on the data side is, yes, we have a ton of data, but a lot of that stuff is unstructured. And for you to get any meaningful insights, the challenge is how do you get the data into a format that you can actually get reasonable analytics and insights from that, right? That's the next emerging problem. You have tons of data, but what do you do with it?
So there is one other topic I wanted to highlight is, I think the kind of knowledge that is also important is that as a lot of people in the software world, they are, I call them, it's in the heaven of software. They dream of these fantastic systems, that can make a lot of things possible. But it's very important that you develop a skill set that makes you understand what are the resources that you use to achieve the objectives? And to kind of make that concrete, I'll give you one example of blockchain, for example. You hear these days a lot of people talk about blockchain as a very promising technology to build the future trusted internet and so on.
But I hear a but coming.
And yes, if you look, for example, at something like Bitcoin, right? If you realize that Bitcoin today, for what it just does, is consuming on an annual basis more energy than Switzerland, right? On an annual basis. So in terms of the resources that you need, if you think
Switzerland's not so big.
Or well, Czech Republic, or yeah, I read somewhere it's 10 million people, so it consumes the resources of a whole year of 10 million people. That's humongous. So now think about this really promising technology, which is promising, but you want to start that to apply on a scale which is 1,000 times, 10,000 times bigger than Bitcoin. It's just impossible with the current.
Oh, it's a challenge that needs to be solved.
That's, yeah.
How many people on here, on this panel, you can raise your hands, yes, think that Bitcoin will be blockchain will be an integral part of our computing future? Yes? Oh, that's everybody. No?
Half raised.
Okay, go ahead, explain that half raise. Explain that, the half raise. Why?
I believe that it's going to happen, but I believe there are a very strong resistance to that.
Okay. And Javier, were you?
No, I know it. I believe that will happen because one of the main challenges that we will have to solve in the future networks and system that we are creating will be the security challenge. And blockchain will be one very suitable way to do that, right? Because more and more we are building systems that are highly distributed. And actually this is the future of the system that we are building. So the role of somebody central who owns all the certificates and who will tell who is right, who is wrong, who is allowed to pass the firewall and who is not, will maybe disappear, right, over time. So we need to start thinking of systems that are capable to distribute the trust, as a blockchain system can do, and can mutually validate each other without trusting each other, which is what blockchain is about.
The reason I say that there will be a lot of resistance because blockchain is taking out of the ownership of data from centralized sources, but the data is a power. If you take
data is oil, as they were saying on another panel, which did not make some happy, but that's what they said.
You're taking control, not data, really. I mean, you are taking somebody's authority, because today you have the role of certificate authority. I'm telling you, you are good to go for my firewall or not, and that's the power I have. That power will disappear because the central entity, the same that Bank of America telling you you are right to get a loan or not, is the same concept, right? Now you are distributing that kind of privilege of security.
That's what I similarly wanted to say as well. That's the whole point of blockchain, that the data gets into the hands of everybody and out of the hands of just a few that use it against everybody.
Yeah.
So it basically really empowers everybody, and that's why I would actually rephrase my answer to your question.
Okay.
It's not necessarily that I believe that it will play a big role in the future. It's more like I hope it will play a big role in the future.
Ivo, you wanting to jump in?
Yeah, I think data is indeed a very powerful instrument, but it's also very dangerous. We have all seen what's happening with Facebook, and so if you have a centralized data system. And I think one of the capabilities that blockchain allows you to do is to work with data without necessarily having to give away your data. You have things like, you know, zero-proof knowledge, for example, which is a technique that allows you to make decisions about data without having to have access to the data. I mean, I can ask, for example, in the room, who's the richest person in this room? Now, I can do that by asking everybody how much money you have, right? I don't think that's something that you really would like to see happening. Blockchain and zero-proof knowledge allows you to keep your knowledge, what you have, in your bank account for yourself,
your
but
identity.
allows the system, but allows the system to make and to come to a conclusion based on statistical methods, which require a lot of computing, but it's possible to define who is the richest person in the room here.
I want to open this up to questions from the audience, so just going to be thinking of your questions, and I'll call you up if you have any questions. But just before, I didn't warn you guys I was going to do this, I should have. But I just am curious if you might be willing to share, what's the biggest mistake you've made in your career? Doesn't have to be negative, it may be something that you learned from, an opportunity that you missed, a job at Amazon, stocks, shares in Amazon, a trend that you missed, a hiring mistake, a leadership mistake that you learned from. So I'm just wondering if anybody here can think about one of those big mistakes you made along the way, and so maybe some in the audience will know not to repeat that mistake.
Well, I'll tell you, some of us are old enough to remember the big bubble that happened, the internet bubble that happened in 2000. So I was one of those that benefited and then saw it come all the way down. So I had a startup that got bought at the peak of the bubble. Yeah. We turned down a $1 billion plus cash offer for a $3 billion plus stock offer.
Why did
which
you turn
went
it
to
down?
nothing.
Because you turned it down because you thought you were going to make more money?
Yeah, of course. You know, you get $1 billion in cash from one person and $3 billion in stock from another person. What do you expect, right? Life is good, things are going up.
Yeah.
They continue to go up forever, and you don't realize they're going to come down.
Were you greedy?
Of course we were greedy, right? There's no doubt. There's
So
no doubt we were
simple.
greedy. So you know, so I think the lesson you learn, first of all, is, you know, cash is king, and the second, diversify all the time, right? Don't bet on a single stock any point in time.
Anybody else miss out on $1 billion or so? Any other mistakes that you can share with the team?
Yeah, I can share a different one. Maybe when it was maybe 10 years ago, I was in charge of a project. I would say it was a different company, the company I work today in Ericsson. At that time, we were redefining how the networks will be built with certain futuristic technologies, right? That today are becoming reality in how to build network. I will not enter in the technical details. But at that time, I was so convinced that I was right on what I was doing, because that was the right answer to the technical problems that we have, that I would run that project without having in consideration that I will never get the budget, right? And then I mobilized all the organization, and I convinced all the way up to the CEO to say, this is the right thing to do for the company. But I didn't realize that I completely missed the opportunity window. So the conclusion of that is that you have to push for the transformation at the right time. If you are very visionary and that you have the right idea for the company, but you completely miss the time window, and then you create a big disaster for the company and for yourself. So be smart and be visionary, but be very careful about the right time for doing the things.
Your biggest mistake was joining this panel?
No. I think one of my biggest mistakes was listening to my parents.
Listening to your parents?
Yeah, that was, I remember I was working in a research organization, and we had developed a chip at that time, some of you will know about, is the emerging standard, which was DOCSIS, which was a standard which now everybody is using. And we had a chip, and we had publicized that at ISACC, which is the major conference in semiconductor. And at the same conference, there was another chip from UCLA, which was by Henry Samueli, who, as some of you might know, is the founder of Broadcom. I was actually planning to start a startup on that. And my parents convinced me that I had a great job, and I shouldn't give it up, and I should just continue, you know, in the company where I was.
So your parents weren't risk takers?
You could say that, yes.
Yeah. Is that a generational difference, you think, or cultural? Or?
No, I think it's both. I think it's cultural, generational. I grew up in Belgium where, you know, you basically were going for one of the big companies and you built your career, you know, and which is all good, but that was the normal thing you did as a good student and a good engineer.
So is the takeaway, don't listen to your parents, or is the takeaway, take risk?
Take risk.
Take risk.
Take a risk by not listening to your parents, you know?
Yeah, I would answer to this. My biggest mistake was not to listen to my parents, and the typical question would be, well, what did they tell you?
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't listen.
That's a good one.
So I actually want to give a real biggest mistake also. We took venture capital, which basically at some point seemed necessary and seemed like a good idea, but it actually turned out not to be, because it made us dependent. And
because why?
It made us dependent.
Made you dependent.
It made us dependent based on that.
But dependent from more money or information or leadership? What type of dependency on your venture capitalists?
All of that.
All of that.
Yeah, so basically we're a fairly independent company otherwise, and we can do what we think is good and ethical. And when we took in venture capital, we were no longer able to do that. We had to do what was expected of us, and some of that wasn't what we wanted.
Is the lesson from that, don't take venture capital, or don't take too much, or don't take it too soon?
I guess since it's inevitable sometimes that would be bad advice. It's just check really as much as you can if you really need it, or if you can basically do it by yourself. And if you really need it, then try to find it from a good source.
Asho, big mistake?
No, my biggest mistake was that I did not start playing tennis from childhood. I missed a lot of years because I realized this is the greatest thing for someone who devotes himself or herself to work, maybe 24 hours, 7 days, and you need an escape somewhere that you can be absolutely in different world. Your brain would only deal how you hit your ball in a way that your opponent could not return. This is the greatest thing.
So a healthy escape. A healthy escape from work.
That's how
Not
I
sex,
escape.
drugs, or alcohol, but
I go
something
to
healthy.
tennis court.
Yeah. Perfect. Are there any questions from the audience? All right, let's go right over here. Cameras, where do you want me? On this side or that side? I'll go this side then. You want to go up here? Yeah, come on up.
Okay, hi. I'm Irina.
What do you do for a living?
I'm the CEO of Mentor Siemens Business. So just, Ashajan, continuing your idea of this tennis stuff. So the question to all of you, did you manage throughout your career to find a right balance in between life and work? If yes, how? If no, are you doing anything to achieve that? Thank you.
Oh, I love that question.
So my old boss said, you have a choice, more life, less work, or more work, less life.
What did you choose?
But my answer to that question really is around distributing it, right? So you have to, these days, at least for me, work and life are intermixed, right? So you have to, you continue both actually along the way, right? And they're seemingly wherever you are, you're working wherever you are, but at the same time, you're carrying on with what you're doing. And you consciously have to be able to go back and forth between these different environments. And it's up to us to make sure that you don't, get completely stressed out and manage that, right? It's more of a management of work and life to kind of the equilibrium point that suits you.
What does your wife say about that? Do you have a wife?
Yeah, my wife would say, actually, yeah. I mean, I make it a point, for example, if I, to the extent possible, I might come home by 6:30, have dinner with the kids, and then, start working again in the evening, right? So fairly religious about managing time that way.
Yes, I would wholeheartedly answer yes to the question. I have good work-life balance because I've made my hobby my profession, actually. I was lucky enough to have a hobby that actually can easily be turned into a profession.
Yeah, and I'm amazed at how many of the very successful CEOs are actually good at pushing the stop button. Maybe it takes them down their career. And even Steve Jobs, I'm reminded of this, even though it's not work-life balance per se, but when somebody was interviewing Steve Jobs about the iPad, and he said, how long do you let your kids use the iPad? He said, I do not let my kids use the iPad. So I think about how some people in tech really have clear lines sometimes about the balance of tech. One more from Javier, and then I'll take another question.
No, I will build on a similar thing. I don't believe that you can make a work-life separation, and I never met anybody successful at that. Actually, you have to merge your work with your life. If what you do, you love what you do it with passion, and you understand that it has a mission, then you feel fulfilled, right? If you try to balance yourself out and carve out time for this and that, you fail miserably. That is my experience for many years.
Okay, another quick, come on up. It'll be easier for the cameras.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Antranik Vartanyan. I'm the CTO of a startup named Illyria Security. We automate traps to capture hackers. My question is actually very straight. We always talk about the trends in cybersecurity, the trends about mobility, the trends about distribution. My question is, why do CTOs, CIOs, COOs don't use technologies that exist today, which are distributed, which are secure, better operating system, better network stacks, instead of thinking about the future, the quantum computing, the blockchain, etc., I'm always thinking, are the CTOs and CIOs of big companies blinded by the market that they are not doing the move to the current innovation instead of thinking about the future innovation?
It's a criticism and a question.
At the same time.
I would say you have to skate where the puck is going, right? So that's I think, how you win the game.
Anybody else? So it's not enough, Ivo. It's not enough just to do it because it's today. You have to be on the trend or else you'll be behind?
Maybe one issue, because today we told a lot about rising of machines, but today not rising of machines, today rising of frameworks and libraries. And one of challenge to choose right frameworks, like libraries, exactly for now. It's maybe why you not start to use right now, or maybe you don't have right pipeline to approve some proof of concepts or check these frameworks. You need just set up this process in your company, that's all.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Anybody else have a question? You want to come on down? Or come on up, as I should have said. What's your name?
My name is Alan.
Alan, come on up.
Yep. And I'm from Synergy International Systems. So my question is that when you're looking at successful people, you can see that beside the technical and functional knowledge and expertise that they have massive soft skills, right? So communication skills, stakeholder management. And these are the things that will let them to grow to very on the leadership level, like CTOs, CIOs, CEOs, etc. So my question is that how are you enabling your team members to grow in that, basically in soft skills?
In soft skills. So how do you foster your teams to continue, if they have soft skills, to make them stronger, or get them if they don't have them? Javier?
I can start. I have a simple recipe. It's trust. I always say to my team, in this room, the less smart person is me, because you are way more capable than me in any of the matters you are dealing. So the first thing is you trust the team, you empower them. And for me, it's a fundamental factor about soft skilling, because in nowadays, the complexity of the technologies that we're dealing with is so massive that you become an orchestrator of complexity rather than a specialist. So it's fundamental to have a team that is really empowered, and then you don't put yourself at the center, because they are at the center. The real knowledge and value, it's in your team and the teams of your teams, right? Actually, it's about inverting the pyramid. Traditionally, we work in a pyramid where the most smart people are supposed to be on top. In reality, that pyramid should be inverted, right? Because the real value, the real productivity is on top, right? And that pyramid narrow down to the management. The people that is in the middle should be controlling, should be enabling productivity and knowledge, right? And that's at least my way of managing teams.
You know?
It's a perfect answer. I would like to say pretty much exactly the same thing. We're all for decentralization, and so it would be very hypocritical to basically see ourselves as centers. So basically the C in CXO, whatever, basically needs to not be center, but really enable the team to do the work and just basically help where you can.
Perfect. Alan, thank you. And thank you to the audience and to everybody on the panel. Time is up, but thank you very much for sharing your insights with all the team here. So hopefully they'll be up here one day. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you.
That was great.
Hey,
Thank you.
Thank you. No. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Ah, okay.